69 movies, 15 slots. He's played a golfer, a wedding singer, a water boy, a hairdresser, an undercover spy, a jeweler, a basketball scout, and now stars as an astronaut in Netflix's latest film, Spaceman. Like it or not, Adam Sandler is one of the goats of comedies. So today, our goal is to determine what 15 roles define Adam Sandler's career. And before we even start any of that, we have to talk about the newest Adam Sandler film that released on Netflix March 1st. And it is called Spaceman. Joining me today is the one and only Chris Harris, my friend and huge Adam Sandler enthusiast himself. Chris, are you ready to embark on this mission with me?
I am ready to embark on the mission. Might I say, Ben, I'm glad we're matching today. One, because
Yeah.
I mean, don't you remember where you almost didn't get the opportunity to see Adam Sandler live when he was doing his stand-up tour, but you were able to at the end of the day, which is great.
Yeah, I know. That's another fun part about this is like not only are we huge Adam Sandler fans, we've also seen Adam Sandler like live, which is an experience on itself. Like the show was incredible. You got to see him in Sacramento. I went out to San Jose to see him like a year later,
hmm
and it's one of my favorite nights. Like, I mean, that was one of the best shows I've been to ever.
It it when you watch all of his movies, especially a lot of his comedic classics, you kind of like have it built up in your head like, oh, is it going to be like what it's like in the movies? But it really is true to Adam Sandler's humor, like his stand-up comedy, which made it all the much better.
Yeah, no, it was something just like I didn't know what to expect going into it. Like I didn't know, was he just going to do his songs? Was he going to do some of the hits? Was he actually going to do kind of like an hour of stand up? And he kind of does everything.
hmm
Like he does all of that and then like just so much more. For my show, I was texting about it. So I saw it in San Jose back in October 2023. I think you had seen it in like December 2022 as when he came to Sacramento. And so when he comes to San Jose, he has the normal crowd. It's Rob Schneider opens up, and then he has a few special guests. So he has Judd Apatow opens up for him and does like a 15-minute set. I thought he was really funny. Sandler comes on stage, and then throughout the show, he just keeps kind of just bringing out guys to make the show fun. I don't know if you remember it, but for the guy from Grown Ups who has the crossed
hmm
eyes,
Yeah,
he just walks out on stage for like a minute and just does the crossed eyes and then walks off.
it
I
does
don't know
that
if that was the
laugh.
case for you guys.
Yeah, he came out and did that too, and he did that patented laugh that he does.
Yeah. And
It's
then
great.
so he does that, and then Kevin James comes out and does a guitar solo to House of the Rising Sun.
Very
And
jealous. You got to
he
see Kevin
starts a
James.
mosh pit in basically the bottom San Jose. And so when talking about Adam Sandler, like we're big fans, and we're also just like I think this is one of our most fascinating careers in Hollywood.
Absolutely. It's a career that was built on, comedy in general and his unique spin on it, which is very much a niche. You
Mhm.
have to, you either really love Adam Sandler or you really don't like Adam Sandler's humor. Like that's just how he is. And he's kind of like, take it or leave it. I'm not going to change based off of what you guys think of me.
Mhm.
And over his, what you said, 50, 60 features in movies, he has a crazy repertoire. And I'm excited to dive into it today, starting off with Spaceman, the movie we just saw last night.
Yeah, and I should just introduce this. This is the Metaverse Movie Channel. My name is Ben Friedman, film critic, and we are talking about not only Spaceman but just the career of Adam Sandler today. So we have kind of a fun little. I'm trying to think of the best word to describe it. A fun little challenge, I think, to kind of end the show. But we're also going to be primarily talking about Spaceman for a good amount of time. Chris Harris, friend from I now want to say probably close to a decade. I don't know if that math is exactly right, but it's somewhere in that like 8 to 10 year
Close.
range. And Adam Sandler has always played an important role in our friendship because
Mhm.
this was humor that you and I always responded to.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's like I said, I mean like you grew up watching him, but the fact that he's been around for what's going on 3 decades solid or 3 to 4 decades, going on his fourth
I think it's
decade
closer
solid.
to 4 now.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. And I think like he like what you said. he's probably the biggest workhorse actor in Hollywood right now, at least in the comedic scene. It's every year he's putting out two movies with at least one of them being well received by the public, or critically acclaimed at this point, right?
Yeah, no, his career has definitely changed, I think. And I think we're going to be talking about it a lot. I think most people would probably associate it with the year 2019 when Uncut Gems comes out. I would argue it's maybe more likely 2017 when he makes his Noah Baumbach film, The Meyerowitz Stories for Netflix. Like that
Hmm.
kind of feels like a little bit of a shift, but Uncut Gems is certainly a film that's really important to discuss when discussing the career of Adam Sandler and where we are now with him. And I don't think we get Spaceman if we don't get Uncut Gems. So we're going to be talking about it, but I guess let's just kind of start with Spaceman. So, Chris, I'm going to introduce the movie real quick. Feel free to jump in on anything that I say. But Spaceman is directed by Johan Renck. Johan Renck, I think this is how you pronounce his name. He's a famous music video director, has worked with all such people as Madonna. And he is a famous TV director. Probably most people, if they know him from his TV work. He's credited for such shows as Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Vikings, Bates Motel, and he won an Emmy for his direction in Chernobyl. Spaceman is actually his second film as a director. His last film was in 2008. It was a Sundance film entitled Downloading Nancy. I am unfamiliar with the film myself. And Spaceman is based on the 2017 novel Spaceman of Bohemia. It's produced by Channing Tatum, which interesting note there, which I was trying to figure out. I don't think I don't think Channing Tatum was ever attached to star in this movie,
Hmm.
but it does seem like a role that Tatum would produce with the belief that maybe he can do the star in it. I don't know what happened there, or I don't know if I'm completely speculating, but I did note with interest that Channing Tatum was the producer. And the premise of Spaceman is Jakub is an astronaut sent to the edge of the solar system to collect mysterious dust. There he meets and befriends a creature lurking in the shadows of his ship. Adam Sandler, Paul Dano, Carey Mulligan, Kunal Nayyar, and Isabella Rossellini star in Spaceman. Chris, we got the chance to check it out yesterday at your place. So I actually went over and we watched it together. What were you thinking going into this movie? Because this one was kind of a weird one to like talk about, or anticipate, because it kind of seemed like we didn't know anything.
Yeah, we had mentioned this prior when we were talking about the movie because when you told me, "Oh, have you heard about it?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" kind of thing. Like it just felt like
Mm.
there was no build up, no promotion for the movie. And you had kind of hinted at it. Netflix kind of has this like, weird way of going about marketing. Like they pick and choose their battles based off of what they think will do well. And I don't know if they didn't think this movie would do well. I have no idea if that was the case here. But I went in blind to this movie, completely blind, just knowing it's a little bit of a slow burn kind of space drama, to an extent, which has underlying underlining tones of comedy throughout it. Um, really went in blind, didn't know what to expect. Overall, though, if you want to attach a word to what I thought about it, I thought the movie was very, very, very interesting. I was pretty much invested the entire movie. I felt like the movie went like this for the majority of the movie. It was kind of like a steady incline, never really having a huge
That's a good way.
peak, never really having a huge peak because I mean at the end of the day, it's more of a slow burn kind of like you know, emotional drama based off of a relationship at the end of the day. But overall, I really did enjoy the movie. Very different role for Adam Sandler. Like again, it's one of those movies like if you see Adam Sandler attached to it, you're like, okay, well, am I getting a comedy? But that that reality has changed. It's shifted, like what you said in 2017. When he's attached to a movie now, you kind of don't know what you're gonna get from him.
Yeah, there's something like just really interesting about the career of Adam Sandler. And that's kind of why I knew more about Spaceman than probably the average audience going into it. I remember this news breaking that he was attached to star in this adaptation of the 2017 novel Spaceman of Bohemia. Like, I very clearly remember that being announced and that the cast was going to include Carey Mulligan and Paul Dano. And I remember like pinning that with interest, where I'm just like, oh, you have that level of cast with this director coming off his Emmy win for Chernobyl, one of the most acclaimed TV shows of all time, and you have Netflix who's partnered with Sandler, and Sandler, I think this movie is announced in like 2021, is 2 years removed off Uncut Gems. And I think a lot of people maybe had this reaction of, is this Sandler going for the Oscar? Is this Sandler actually kind of throwing his name in the gauntlet, kind of saying like, I'm going for this, like I'm going to prove myself right now? And I think that was maybe the interpretation some people had. And it was certainly one that I was noting with interest, because I'm like, if this movie could be exceptional and it's kind of a physical showcase for Sandler as well as a dramatic turning point for him as an actor, this could really level up his career in a way that I don't know of if any of us were expecting, even post Uncut Gems, because Uncut Gems still is using the Sandler character archetype to its advantage. This one doesn't even really feel in that universe in which, or that sandbox, I should say, that Sandler really plays in. And watching this movie, what I found so interesting is it's both pushing Sandler as an actor in a way that I didn't know that he could do, but two, it is utilizing Adam Sandler and everything that makes Adam Sandler great and a comedic presence in his comedies. Like, it is using the whole package of Adam Sandler.
Hmm. Yeah, again, like what I was saying is the movie itself is very, I mean, slow pace is kind of like the wrong term because I think it paces well. But for an hour 40-minute movie that's in one location primarily for the majority of the movie, in a space unit, whatever you want to call it, like a shuttle, um, I think he makes the most of it. I thought it was a killer acting performance. Um, Dano, I mean, is just always going to add great heights to a movie. I mean, he's killer in pretty much everything he's in. We've talked about this before.
Mm.
And I think what I think really made the movie great for Adam Sandler is Dano elevated Sandler. When I was thinking back about it, I
Yeah.
was thinking about like Dano is great in the movie, but every scene he's in, his character is like building and correlating Adam Sandler's character to a new level and really adding depth to it. And I'm like, okay, if Dano's not there, I don't think Adam Sandler has a great performance. When I was thinking back at it, I'm like, they build very well off each other. It's a very interesting role for Dano too. And I think it just really added to it.
And I guess we should give some quick context to Spaceman and the relationships between our main characters. So Adam Sandler is the titular spaceman in this. He's on this journey through the solar system to basically get to what, as I understand it to be described, it's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's, if not the beginning of time, it is kind of this point in the galaxy where all answers lie to some degree. That's kind of the philosophical musings I think they place on this significance. And while on the ship, he befriends this creature that's lurking in the shadows. This creature is a giant spider voiced by Paul Dano. And Carey Mulligan plays his wife in the movie. And the key understanding of this relationship is that Jakub is this man who supposedly loves his wife and yet is willing to take on this endeavor and leave her for years. And that conflict that's caused, and the fact that she's pregnant while he's doing this, and just
the 6-month mission.
They've hit this riff in their marriage, and now she's now contemplating leave. She's going to leave him, and he kind of realizes it's coming. So it's this philosophical musing between the character of Jakub and Hanush, who's the spider voiced by Dano, as Hanush tries to basically understand humanity and what it means to be human, because he's obviously this intergalactic creature. He can't contextualize Earth. and it's the inhabitants of Earth. So
Hmm.
it's this kind of like therapeutic session, but also this kind of, I don't want to say court procedure because that's the wrong word, but interrogation, I guess, is probably the better word there, of these two just kind of learning what it means to be essentially alive and what that displays. And you're right, Dano is the secret sauce to this movie completely. This movie doesn't work if Dano's not the spider voice, because
Agreed.
it's pretty jarring when the spider pops out in the movie.
Yeah, that's one of my big takeaways was, I mean, the spider is a metaphor. I mean,
Mm,
if you it's a metaphor for Adam Sandler's fear is losing his wife, and so he doesn't want to address it. And so when the spider shows up that he's terrified of, he has to address it. And the spider is wanting to get to the deep dark secrets of his relationship, what he's been putting off. And so he finally has to face that, and in doing so, he becomes very close with this entity, this something from outer space, and they develop a relationship and a founding for what life really is together, and ultimately leads to the climax of the movie. But I mean, it's a beautifully captured movie at the end of the day. If watching the movie, you're kind of confused for a little bit, you're kind of like, okay, this is making sense. Then you get confused again. Then you're really emotional within the movie. It all wraps together nicely. Carey Mulligan plays the wife, like what you were
yeah,
saying. I thought she was phenomenal. I mean, she really is
she's
not.
really good in this movie.
She's really not in the movie for a great amount of time, but I thought she captured the essence of a pregnant woman that's been emotionally detached from her husband for years now, is what it feels like. Great. And granted, I don't know what that's supposed to look like, but I felt like she captured it within the movie and it added so much depth.
What she does so well in this movie is the juxtaposition between where we find her at this point in time, kind of just completely detached from this relationship in this seemingly loveless marriage, kind of just trapped, versus when we see flashbacks of this character, of kind of the idealistic, hopeful, in love younger woman. And she plays them so well that we understand this entire relationship despite really only ever seeing the beginning and the end. We have a little bit of the middle from time to time. We kind of see the deterioration, but deterioration is kind of just explained through our context of Jakub as a person, where we just know, okay, if this is who Jakub is presenting himself to be to us, the audience, imagine how he is with Carey Mulligan's character. And
Exactly.
she's really good. My hot take is she's better in this movie than she is in her Oscar-nominated film Maestro this year. Like, very different roles. This one was the one that I thought she was more not inclined to do because she's a really talented actress. This was just the one that I thought she was given more to do, I guess, in it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of these supporting characters. Kunal Nayyar, who's from The Big Bang Theory, is in here. He's basically ground control. It's not NASA because this
Czech
is
Republic.
in yeah, like this is in Bohemia, so like it's not NASA, but it's that ground control character. So he's the one that's really talking
Yeah.
through Sandler Earth to space. And he does a really nice job in this movie. I want to focus a little bit on Sandler in this role because it is a very physically challenging role. And you
Hmm.
do feel the effort of this performance at times where it's just like, oh, you really feel, because obviously they're in space, they're in the zero gravity. Like you really feel his movements. And it does feel like an actor. And it's what I like about this movie. It's an actor out of their comfort zone completely. Like this really strips Sandler out of what he's known for.
Hmm.
And that works really well because the whole movie is this guy is out of his element.
Yeah, exactly. And it has this sense of loneliness to it. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously being in space for 6 months is gonna drive you mad. And it feels like he didn't necessarily go crazy, even though like there's aspects of the movie where he's like, damn, am I like hallucinating? Am I going
Mm.
nuts? But you just feel his distress, his loneliness, his detachment from reality when in space, and it adds to, the story, the essence of the of what he's trying to capture in the character. And again, he does it beautifully. It's a very, very out there role for him. But again, I feel like it just shows that if Adam Sandler can do this, what can't he do? When he took on the role of Uncut Gems in 2019, that was a role where everyone's like, okay, what, damn, what did we just see? We
Mhm.
just were stunned by something. And ultimately, did he get snubbed of an Oscar nomination? Absolutely. But there was a lot
He
of
got
competition
snubbed
this
of a
year.
win.
Yeah, there's a lot
Like,
of competition that year.
yeah.
But again, I think this could be him, like what you were saying. When he took on this role, he could be like, okay, I'm going to give it my all and prove that that wasn't a fluke, that Uncut Gems wasn't a fluke, and that I can take on these out there, out of my comfort zone kind of roles and do it to the best of any actor in Hollywood.
Yeah, no, this is a showcase performance for Sandler that this isn't one of my favorite Sandler performances, and I wouldn't even call this one of my favorite Sandler dramatic performances. This was
Hmm.
just another side to the Sandler package that I was just like, oh, okay, he has even more as an actor than I think we were all aware of. Even if this movie isn't fully successful, which I think this movie has elements that I'm pretty mixed on. Johan Renck, as I believe as you pronounce him, the director of this movie, you called it very deliberate, and I like this analogy of the incline because that is what this movie feels like. I believe his direction is very intentional, and overall, it worked. There is this visionary style from him, especially when we're in space. Like there's this effect that keeps being used in the movie, and it's very jarring for the first like 30 to 40 minutes where you're basically looking
Like
at
a bubble.
Sandler's life or the character of Jakub's life through the eyes of a spider. So it's kind of
Oh,
like this.
hmm.
I'm trying to think of the almost fisheye, but like it almost even has like a little bit of an algorithmic look to it. Kind of, that AI like rendering. And I don't think it's actually AI, but there is certainly something that feels artificial about it, which is maybe an analogy for what Jakub is as a person. He's this person that doesn't really make sense and you can't really hold on to, and he doesn't even really feel necessarily real.
Yeah,
But there is,
that's
yeah,
kind of
go
how
for it.
that's what's kind of how I took it, is like it feels like it's balancing between what's reality and what's not. And that's kind of like how I interpreted it. But I definitely did agree, like it felt like you're watching it through the spider's perspective, almost from like a third party, third world perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like it was teetering, like between like, okay, like is this reality? Is this what I'm actually seeing, or is it like falsified or made up in his head? Is he hallucinating? And I like not knowing that. And I agree, the first 30, 40 minutes that you watch those angles, the view of it, I'm like, this is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think what it does is it grounds the movie in this character of Hanush, who's essentially trying to analyze the world of Earth. And so when he's looking at it, he himself cannot actually contemplate reality versus fiction, lies versus not. He's this being that we are led to believe cannot understand the what's it called? He cannot understand like lying to one another. Like he doesn't understand the damage that we cause one another. And that's kind of this perspective when we're in it. It is jarring, and there is a lot of stuff in this movie that is jarring. I think the biggest critique of this movie is not its pacing, it's the way that the story unfolds. There are certainly times where it's just like it kind of has this rinse and repeat feeling to it where it's just like we're with Jakub for a little bit, and now we're in a flashback, and now we're with Jakub and the spider, and they have a revelation, and now we're in a flashback again, and then the revelation, and then the flashback again. Like it is kind of this repeat and repeat. Sorry, rinse and repeat style to Spaceman, and I think it can become a little derivative at time. And there's moments of this movie that aren't maybe as explored as well as I would have liked, because this movie is trying to essentially explain how Jakub came to be. And so there's this whole backstory given to him. And I'm not going to really spoil any of this backstory, but
Hmm.
it plays a lot with the idea of who his father is in this world and what he stood for, his political beliefs, and how essentially he is now making up for the sins of his father.
Hmm.
But in making up for the sins of his father, he has to then, he's putting all the burden and the weight of who his father is on himself. So he is, if not becoming his father, he is failing like his father failed as well.
Yeah. There's a there's a scene in this movie that really stood out to me, and it again, it really does reveal how great of an actor Adam Sandler is, even when he's not on screen. It's the scene where, again, without spoiling anything, he makes a phone call to his wife,
Oh yeah.
and it's beautiful. It's like it's emotional, and it just is genius. It's really, really great. And it came at the perfect time in the movie again where you're like needing something like that. And yeah, I see what you're saying a little bit about the pace is like kind of what you'd expect from a space movie, but also going back and forth a little between jumping back in time versus going to Adam Sandler's reality, or Jakub's reality. It's kind of like, again, a metaphor for like what he is faced with every single day in space, being alone. It's like all he can think about is the past. That's all he can think
Mm.
about, because what's in front of him is like a 6 month journey where it's repetition every single day. So I felt like that we were kind of really engulfed in what repetition is to him, and like just jumping back and forth between, again, what's reality and what's not. And that's kind of what you want out of one of these emotionally capturing movies.
And it's that rinse and repeat element that you were just talking about, the repetition of it, that also works to the film's benefit. One of my favorite moments in this movie, and you're so right to identify Sandler, like that scene of him on the phone, because it's a scene that could have been played big, and
Hmm.
Sandler can kind of reach that explosive height, even if it's anger, if it's crying, like he can get loud.
Hmm.
And this film never really allows this character of Jakub to go loud, but you feel that emotion of him ready to burst in him, and yet he's kind of holding it down the entire film. It is this restraint performance from Sandler, and moments of it like that work so well. There's another moment of that repetition. The idea is like we are the habits that we repeat every day, and then like that having an effect on his love life, his marriage, because he is a creature of habit and he
Hmm.
really can't change. One of my favorite moments, and I don't know if you like clocked it in the movie, is when we're in these scenes with his wife, played by Carey Mulligan again. Like we're seeing the visions in like the spider's flashback, so we see them having a fight, and he kind of just ends it. The character of Jakub just ends the fight, and he's like, whatever. And he just walks away. And that happens like two or three more times. Like it's him walking away from the fight and just kind of being like, this is how it's just going to end. Like, I don't really care to get into it.
Hmm.
But you then see like how damaging that is. And I thought it was so interesting. And maybe this is me contextualizing too much about putting Adam Sandler in this type of role, but there is obviously the stereotype, and we're going to talk about when we get into the Adam Sandler movies, of Adam Sandler being the schlubby husband married to the beautiful, incredible wife.
Hmm.
And then like, he kind of just does like dumb things throughout it, but it doesn't matter because he's Adam Sandler and he's the leading man. And this movie is playing with that idea in a lot of ways, where it's just like he is kind of that typical Adam Sandler protagonist, and his wife is also kind of this like typical Adam Sandler wife, but it's portraying Carey Mulligan of like, what would that be to be married to this type of character, and what are the downsides of Adam Sandler being this type of person
Hmm.
in it. So like it's an interesting exploration to then take everything that we know about Sandler and then kind of see it weaponized. And I thought it was pretty exceptional in how it utilized this. I without getting into spoilers, like there's one scene at the end where the character of Jakub kind of absolves himself of everything. And like it's the moment of reconciliation. And it's one of my favorite Sandler performances, just bar none. Like that moment is, I'm just like, oh, he's transcended to another level that I really didn't know he could have. And it's also, you come back to this point on Dano earlier that you said, like, Dano, we're not talking enough about Dano in this role because the last 30 minutes of this movie are so reliant on Dano's voice performance in it. And it does not work if Dano is not giving it his all in it. And he sells it. The last 20 minutes of this movie are an emotional roller coaster that you buy into, because not only have you bought into Adam Sandler in this role, you've specifically bought into Paul Dano being who he is in this role.
Yeah, I think the end of the movie was my favorite part of the movie. It ended beautifully. I mean, like I said, Dano, every scene he's in, he's supporting Sandler, and you feel it though. It never feels like he's trying to like be a Sandler in the movie. Like he's trying to like say, whatever. He's not trying to be the main character, I guess, if you want to say that. But he heightens Sandler's performance every single time, and it almost feels like Sandler's character like needs him, needs him at the end of the tail end of the movie. I kind of talked about this last night with you. The only real like thing that I guess bugged me a little bit about the movie, like something that I would have liked to see a little bit more or have seen a little bit more, would be like a little bit more of a definition of the score of the movie. I was thinking about it a little bit, and I was like, okay, well, am I thinking that because I'm so used to like an Interstellar, like a Gravity, where the score is driving the entire movie and it really adds to it? Is that what I'm missing? But also, do I need that in this movie? Like that's where a little bit my discrepancy is. I came to the conclusion that I do think the score would have added a little bit more to it had it have been more present. However, this movie, like we've said a ton, the underlying message is loneliness, and having silence just is exactly that. And so I felt like in aspects of this movie and parts of the movie, you really did need to hear just Sandler and his thoughts. You didn't really need anything else in the background taking away from that. But I will say though, in the third act, where it is, I'm sorry, it's a flash drive I'm just messing with. The third act of the movie, when it really hits its peak, the score is beautiful. It adds so much to it. It's a spectacle to watch. Dano's great. It's all amazing. It comes together, ties together very well. I guess I just would have liked a little bit more from it throughout the movie. But again, I see the direction. I understand where they're going with it. That was my only thing where I'm like, okay, maybe that would add a little bit more to it.
And well, like one last thought on Dano, maybe this is kind of how I'll wrap up on my thoughts on Spaceman, is I think what we've like addressed like with this and like his supporting role is like, this is what he's kind of best at. Like when I think of the best Paul Dano performances, I don't typically think of him as the leading man in those movies. He is really like at his apex to me when he is the secondary character, like when he is the guy supporting the guy. Like I saw Dumb Money last year, which Dano is like the lead in it, and he's good in the movie. Like it's hard to get a bad Dano performance. It's just that he doesn't really get the people to play off as much in it. Like he really does well when he doesn't have to. He's such a heavy lifter of an actor, where he's doing all the grueling work to put the star in, a starlight. Like he's there to like have other people shine. And when he's not given that same opportunity to have a co-star who's able to put him in that light, it just doesn't really work. And maybe that's an unfair criticism because Dano is one of the experts at basically putting someone over, but it does affect it. And that is what Dano does in this movie. And it's what Dano does the best of his career. Like if you think of all the best Dano performances, I think of Little Miss Sunshine, where he's the supporting brother in that movie. I think of There Will Be Blood, where he literally plays second fiddle to Daniel Day-Lewis. I think of him even in a role like the Riddler, where he is quite literally, the antagonist, the secondary character
Hmm.
to Batman. And I think of all his other roles, like even Fableman's last year is another perfect example where the reason he doesn't get nominated for that film is because he's doing the heavy lifting of that film and it's going unnoticed. But that film doesn't work if Dano's not doing what Dano's doing the entire runtime of the movie.
Well, yeah, and mind you too that this role is voice acting. I mean,
Mm,
at its core, and it's pretty incredible. Really, really great work from Dano. I mean, the movie itself, that the performances are great. Like
you know,
you really can't say anything bad about them.
I enjoyed this movie. I've heard some mixed reaction to it. I know people are having some struggles with the pacing, the score, and the philosophical musings of this movie. I think some people see this as a man lost in space trying to go through therapy, like discovering himself, like which is a trope that I guess we have seen lots of times. I just thought if this is a trope, then this movie utilizes the trope well. And I also think it has another layer in it and a level of creativity and like just a unique energy that I can't say that I've seen from anything else. And maybe it's kind of like you could call it stunt casting to put Sandler in this role. Cause I mean, like, I think of other films that have this, like, there are beats of Ad Astra with Brad Pitt in this movie. There are some similarities to Interstellar, like in ideas, I guess. But really, to me, this movie works because it's three performances that I think are just exceptional. And I'd recommend it for that reason. On
Hmm.
a 5-star review, I'm going pretty high on this movie. I feel pretty comfortable saying this is a 4 out of 5-star review for me.
I would pretty much agree. I when I was thinking about it, if I was going to go out of five, I think I do three and a half, leaning
Mm.
four. Really did enjoy the movie though. Great watch. I mean, and if you think about it, an hour 45, I mean, that's like really not long. Like that's like almost standard for a movie now.
Yeah, I think that is something that I also found really interesting too, where it's just like I heard so much about the pacing issues of this movie and people being like, this is so slow and tedious. And then I watched the movie, and I guess maybe it's just I don't feel it as heavily in an hour 40 movie. They sometimes when I hear that, I'm like, oh God, this is a 2 hour and 20-minute movie. And it's not that. Like this movie is fairly brisk, and you really do feel it's coming to its conclusion when it gets there.
Hmm.
To be honest, I thought it was better paced than another sci-fi epic that came out this week. Thank you all for watching that review in heavy numbers. But let's pivot over to this challenge. And as we were trying to frame our discussion of this second part, it was the Hall of Fame, but I didn't quite want to do the Hall of Fame for Adam Sandler. So I wanted to think of a slightly different challenge to it. And I kind of wanted to do the tier list. And I was trying to think like how we could do it. I didn't want to do Mount Rushmore because it seemed like there was an obvious 3 or 4. So I wanted to talk more in depth about his career. And I was trying to think of like when we contextualize people's careers or like a year past, like what do we do? And I thought of the NBA with the all NBA ballot, which
Hmm.
is it selects the first team, the second team, the third team, 5 people from each team.
Hmm.
And that is supposed to really be when you look back at it, these were the 15 players that defined this year's season.
Hmm.
They're, if not the best, they're the ones that really like made their impact known in the league for the year. And so with that, I'm like, well, that might be an interesting way to approach the Adam Sandler Hall of Fame, essentially, is do an all NBA tier list, all Sandler, I guess is what we'll call it.
And mind you, he's a huge NBA fan too.
And he's a huge NBA fan, so it tied in really well. So there's 69 movies you could pick from. There's a few of those that are supporting roles, so I don't know how many supporting roles we're going to have, but it's essentially first team, second team, third team, 5 people in each team. The goal is to determine Sandler's, his 15. Like, what are the 15 that we'll remember from him for his career?
Hmm.
There's a few criterias, except they're loose, so it's not like we have like the NBA this year, we've switched to position lists. So it's just kind of however you view what makes first team, second team, third team. But criterias I think that are fair to talk about our box office, critical or lack of critical response, legacy, and most importantly, what we are looking for when we think of Adam Sandler's career. We
Hmm.
have 15 names in total. I did one list, Chris did another list, and then we have also the six man of the year, which is Rob Schneider. So we're defining what is the quintessential Rob Schneider six man of the year performance.
Hmm.
And I did coach of the year, and I'll just admit right now, there's a reason Hustle will not be on my list solely because I put his character of, I am trying to find his name, Stanley Sugarman from Hustle. He's the coach of my team to keep in line with the NBA idea.
Hmm.
And that way I could get one other film on this list. So
I'm
I'll
glad you did that because I did not I put Hustle in a tier because I knew you were going to do that. So I was like, I want everyone to be able to hear my take on Hustle.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean the coach I did a little bit different from you. I did the coach of their basketball team in Grown Ups. Like he's the coach. I forget that
Oh,
actor's
sure.
name. What's do you know his name off the top of your head?
Uh, the coach in Grown Ups. Oh, he's the old
He's in a
guy.
ton of the movies.
Oh God, I
He's
know
in
he's.
51st Dates too.
I can picture him, and I'm blanking out on his name. Let me look it up real quick. But he's the older guy.
He's the
Uh,
buzzer guy. Goes.
oh gosh, I'm trying to look it up. Where is it? Where is it? Where is
He's in
it?
51st Dates too. He's the dad. He's a good actor.
Uh, Blake Clark.
Yeah, so I put him as the coach of all these teams, the
That's fair.
all-star teams, if you want to say. Um, but yeah, I agree with everything. The criteria, box office, comedy, just in general, underlying like Adam Sandler performances, but like it just basically goes off of his legacy. Like what movies am I personally gonna remember as like his top 15 movies based in tiers?
So let's just kind of break this down. I will read some of my names from the first team, and we'll kind of go back and forth on this for a second. But
Mhm.
I'm just going to hit the names that I think are guaranteed. So you're going to tell me yes or no on first team. And
Okay.
I'm just going to say it's safe to believe that Billy Madison is first team
Easily. It's like no question.
and Happy Gilmore is first team.
Yes,
Like
we're in agreement.
those were true with a bullet. Like there was no
Happy
question about
Gilmore. I
it.
mean, we got the jerseys on and everything.
Yeah, there was no question. Like if you're talking about the career of Adam Sandler, like his two most iconic roles are probably 95, Billy Madison, 96, Happy Gilmore.
Well, okay, so the question you have to ask now is being an Adam Sandler stan like we are,
Mhm.
which movie of those two are you recommending first for someone if they've never seen Adam Sandler before and they've never even, let's say they've never heard of him, right? And you say, okay, you need to go watch this movie. Which one are you saying first, Happy Gilmore or Billy Madison?
Happy Gilmore. It's without a question. Like I think if you are going by just pure laughs, I think Gilmore is probably ahead of Billy Madison, even if I love Billy Madison and might be the one I gravitate towards more. Billy Madison, it's like it is a lot of the Sandler friends. It's Norm Macdonald. It's Chris Farley's in this movie. It's a lot of the shenanigans of Adam Sandler, and it's him doing like the childish performance the entire time. Happy Gilmore, like it's almost a little bit of a level up because you have someone like Carl Weathers in there playing the role. I'm forgetting who plays Shooter McGavin in
Oh,
Happy
yeah, I
Gilmore.
don't.
I'm blanking on the actor's name right now. I will pull it up.
He's one of those punchable actors. Like, has a very punchable
Christopher
face.
McDonald. Like you have Christopher McDonald in there. You have Julie Bowen, obviously, in this movie. The famous cameo from Bob Barker is legendary. I just think this movie is a little bit more accessible and isn't as reliant on Sandler doing some of his childhood shtick, I guess you could say, where
Yeah,
it's just a little less annoying if you're adverse to Adam Sandler.
that's kind of like I'm in agreement. I think though, like the argument for a Billy Madison is like Happy Gilmore is like really doesn't it's not the Adam Sandler niche that Billy
Mm.
Madison is. Billy Madison is the first movie that really revolutionized who Adam Sandler is as a comedic actor in his specific unique style. And so like if you're going to recommend a movie, I think Happy Gilmore is the right answer, but I think Billy Madison is like the most unique one where you're like, okay, if you want something you're not going to get from this actor, you watch Billy Madison.
Sure. I think that's a perfect way of putting it. So I'm gonna just read the rest of my first team. and you just tell me yes or no, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
So the other three names that I brought in there was Howard Ratner for Uncut Gems.
I have that one in there too.
I have Robbie Hart for The Wedding Singer,
Okay. Okay,
and
keep
then
going.
I have Bobby Boucher for The Water Boy.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So
Okay.
okay, so it sounds like we have Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, and Howard Ratner from Uncut Gems
Mhm.
agreed on. I
Yep.
just real quick on Uncut Gems before we talk about the ones that we have different here. Uh, I mean, this is kind of the performance that matters the most to Adam Sandler in the 21st century, outside of Punch Drunk Love. Like this is really what legitimate makes him legitimate as an actor. Like this is truly like it's the antidote of, or it's the story of Daniel Day-Lewis writing him and saying, Howard Ratner, this character that you make in Uncut Gems is one of the finest performances I've ever seen in film ever. Like
I
it's the fact that like his
100% agree.
peers acknowledge it, like
100%.
as, and like he has the one-on-one interview that year with Variety for with Brad Pitt where they're doing the actors roundtable. He's a part of all these actors roundtables. He wins the Spirit Independent Film Awards that year. Like it really just makes Adam Sandler, like, to some degree, if you didn't acknowledge his talent, this film made it kind of impossible to deny it, because at some point Hollywood itself kind of opened their arms up to Adam Sandler being this talent.
Long story short on my end, this movie is a must in tier one because this is his most memorable performance for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most memorable movie. It's not the it's not the most well-rounded movie, even though it's a great movie overall, but it is by far and away his most memorable performance where I'm like, Adam Sandler did that, really did that, and that's pretty unreal. It's something that no one we're probably never going to see but again. Like if you I mean, I'm not going to say there's not going to be another Adam Sandler, which I really hope there never will be, but like the thing is that I can't see another actor who's built his repertoire on a niche on pure comedy off of an SNL background, and he out of nowhere does this crazy, amazing actor worthy role that stuns everybody, and it was universally loved too.
Yeah, this is his welcome to the party,
Yeah,
which I think some people would probably fairly assess that to films like Punch Drunk Love, which is like him working with Paul Thomas Anderson.
100%.
Other like small dramatic performances. I love him in a film called Reign Over Me, from 2007. Like it's certainly there. This one is just, I think, and maybe it's the fact that he got the critical response, which he had always kind of lacked
Hmm.
outside of the Paul Thomas Andersons, outside of the Reign Over Me of the world. Like this was really the one that was just like, it's kind of undeniable. And if you're not a part of it, like obviously I know critical consensus wasn't like universally perfect with this movie, but I mean, this was certainly his most acclaimed role. And it felt like it allowed everyone to take him more seriously. And like I said, as you said, it's just his most memorable performance. Like it is a pretty tour de force performance where you watch it. And I've said it, he should win the Oscar this year. Like there's no doubt. I know Joaquin Phoenix wins it for Joker. I think Howard Ratner is a better character and a better portrayal by Adam Sandler. Like his real only competition to me this year is Adam Driver in Marriage Story. Like that's it. Like that's the only other performance from this year that I would
Oh,
even
amazing.
equate to Adam Sandler and Uncut Gems, and I'd still choose Uncut Gems over it. So
Hmm.
that kind of just tells you the level of what. So I had three. We had two that we didn't agree on. Uh, so I guess I should ask you: is The Water Boy on your list?
Yeah, it is. It's in tier two. It's
And
in there.
then is The Wedding Singer on your list?
The Wedding Singer is also in tier two.
Okay, so I guess we'll talk about these in a second, but like let's round out your first team. So who are the two that didn't make your first team?
Yeah, so the first one, which again, I mean, nothing against you, I thought this was a for sure first team, is his most iconic rom-com, 50 First Dates. It
Mm,
to me, it's a staple Adam Sandler movie that gives a great Rob Schneider performance too.
mm,
It's amazing, a very good feel-good movie, and it's something that like again, if I it's one of the things for me that I'll be honest made me put it in tier one is it's probably his. I mean, at least in my eyes, probably his most rewatchable movie, or at least top one of them. And so that to me was like, okay, if I can sit down and watch this movie and laugh over and over and really enjoy the movie, I'm going to put it in tier one. And that was mostly my reason for it. Henry Roth, I mean, he's amazing as him in the movie, and he's so persistent to like get this girl and really like change her life and help her for the better. And so finds love within it. And it's a hilarious movie. And you know who's really great in that movie too is Sean Astin.
Yes, he's very funny in this.
He's so funny in that movie.
So okay, so we essentially had the same logic. We just put it towards different movies. So I think we both identified that one of the most important aspects of Sandler is as a leading romantic comedy man.
Mm-hmm.
And so you define 50 First Dates as his most iconic. I just define The Wedding Singer as his most
The Wedding Singer
iconic.
is my first movie. I mean, I wrote down in tier two. It again is a super iconic romantic comedy. I think I think 50 First Dates just hits home with me a little bit more. I watched it first before I watched The Wedding Singer too. But again, they're right next to each other where I'm like, okay, they could be interchangeable.
Yeah, so I put The Wedding Singer in there because to me, this is the movie I prefer watching over 50 First Dates. I'm a little mixed. I'm more mixed on 50 First Dates than most people are. I like the sweetness of this movie, and something has always bothered me about this film, and I've never been able to identify it particularly well. Maybe it's just the character that Sandler plays in this movie. It's a movie that I like, and yet it's not necessarily my favorite in his filmography, but it's going to make the list. I have it in third team. It made my third team
Really?
here. Yeah, and we'll talk about it, I guess, a little bit more as we get there. It to me, I don't know if I would have had it in my 15, but the iconicness of this performance, the fact of how many people do love this role, this definitely became the moment where I'm just like, my own bias aside, my own thoughts on the movies, it's kind of just impossible to have it anywhere not on this list. And if we're being completely fair, there's maybe a case that it should be second team. So we'll Robbie Hart to me for Wedding Singer. I think it's his softest performance as a leading man comedically. It establishes the chemistry with Drew Barrymore. And I also just think this movie is incredibly funny. I think every line of this movie works. I think there's a lot more of a dramatic performance in him in this movie as this guy grieving over his relationship and falling in love. I think it's just him showing really for the first time a softer side to him as an actor comedically. I think this was really the case of like, oh, okay, like he makes sense as this character. So that's why I had Wedding Singer. You had it in second team. What's your last spot for first team then?
So again, I went more on the basketball side here, and I went with Hustle. I mean,
You
I
went
think
Hustle?
I did go. I did put this in tier one. Okay, so when I originally wrote this, I had it in tier two, and then I was thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, this movie is Adam Sandler, and it has his footprint on it, and it has his handprint on it, and it's just it's so true to like his love for basketball, and I mean, even though he's not, I mean, he's the main actor in the movie, but he's like supporting in some sense as well. I really did think that, like, again, it's more of a dramatic role for him, and he kills it. And it's one of my favorite movies of, was it 2 years ago? Or was it last year?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
So 2022.
Sure, 2022. Yeah.
Beautiful movie. And yes, does my love of basketball play into it? Yes, of course it does. But it's a movie. It's again very rewatchable. It has great peaks in it. Emotions flare in this movie from like a perspective of the watch. So I mean, I love it, and I think Adam Sandler's killer in it too. It's a very unique role for him again, though, too.
So if we're going movies just solely based on movies, Hustle would probably be on my first or second team.
Hmm.
The reason one I wanted to just kind of use the cheat of putting him as the coach is one, I thought it'd be a fun way to just talk about more movies. I also think he's really good in Hustle, but the performance I remember the most from Hustle is Juancho Hernan Gomez, who
Hmm.
plays the athlete in this movie.
Hmm.
Sandler's great in this movie. Like, there's no doubt. I think Sandler is so well equipped to play this role, and the connections that he's able to bring to the love of the sport in it works so well in his benefit. And yeah, I really adore this movie as well. That's my logic for not having it in on the first team,
Yeah.
even though I hold this film at high value. Like, this is one of my favorite Sandler watches.
Yeah.
So that's our first team. So that
You said you had
means,
the Water Boy in one, too, is that you said?
yeah. So I have a question: is the Water Boy on your second or third?
It's on second. It's
Okay,
in two. So I had the Wedding Singer and the
the Water
Water
Boy.
Boy on two.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess let's just kind of pivot over to second team. So I'm going to, how do I want to do this? Read your second team ballot,
Okay.
and I will
So
tell you yes or no.
so there's the two that I have that you had in one. I had the Wedding Singer and I had the Water Boy, both in
Mhm.
two. Both amazing movies for we could talk about the Water Boy. We haven't really talked about that, but great movie.
Mhm.
Um Also in tier two, I have Big Daddy, Adam Sandler classic. I have Grown Ups, and then I have a little bit of a curveball here. I have You Don't Mess with the Zohan in tier two as
Okay.
well.
So we have a few crossovers here. Obviously, you had two of mine that I made in the first team. I also had Lenny Feeder for Grown Ups
Hmm.
in my second team, and I also had Sonny Koufax for Big Daddy
Hmm.
on my second team. My second team is rounded out, and I'll read my list. I have Barry Egan from Punch Drunk Love. I
Hmm.
have Lenny Feeder for Grown Ups.
Hmm.
I have Sonny Koufax for Big Daddy. I have Count Dracula for Hotel Transylvania, and I'll explain that pick in a second.
Okay.
And then I have Dave Busnick for Anger Management in my second team.
So a couple of I've never seen Punch Drunk Love. I told you that last night. It's on my watch list.
Mhm.
I've also never seen Anger Management either. But I mean, like I those are again movies I need to watch of Adam Sandler.
So let's talk about the one that we had kind of pushed to talk about in the second team, which is the Water Boy.
Yeah,
Uh, I haven't seen the Water Boy in a really long time.
same.
It is just the case of whenever I think about this movie, I just laugh. Like,
Hmm.
there's clips of it that I do see are just, and maybe it's also the orange jersey that he wears, Bobby Boucher jersey. Uh, I don't know. I just remember really liking this movie, and I think I also maybe just put it there to acknowledge the run. Like, if you look at my first team, Billy Madison 95, Happy Gilmore 96, Wedding Singer 98, Waterboy 98.
Hmm.
Like, that run that he has in the early or in the late 90s is just kind of next to none in terms of just comedic runtime, I guess. Like, that
Yeah.
is a 5 year thing, and it caps up with 99 with Big Daddy. Like, that's a pretty just elite tier. So maybe that's why I put the Water Boy. I didn't know what to do with my fifth spot for my first team. So that's why I put the Water Boy there. Just also because I think it's a little bit of a play off his character Canteen Boy from SNL. So it felt like it really used the SNL model for Adam Sandler in here. And I just think a lot of people value that movie. Again, I just haven't seen it in so long that I was struggling kind of how to talk about it.
That
Let's talk
that
about,
movie is hilarious. And the thing is, like, that movie and The Longest Yard are two football movies, but they are so distinctly different. And I find The Waterboy to be funnier, like just overall, than The Longest Yard. Great movie, but not. I just the Waterboy
yeah,
is more memorable for me.
spoiler alert, Longest Yard does not make this list. So let's just talk about the two that I have that you haven't seen just to kind of get them out of the way. And it's a quick explanation for both. When I was thinking of second tier, uh, I'm like, if you work with Paul Thomas Anderson and you get that level of acclaim and it's like a beloved movie, like, you just get second tier. Like, you work with one of our best directors of today, you get the second tier like nod. And he's the lead of that movie. So that's where I was just like, boom, out of here, like second team, no question. The other one I had was Dave Busnick for Anger Management, probably one that most people would disagree with. I wouldn't say this movie is all that special. The reason I have it in second team is if I'm thinking of an actor at the height of their powers, at their apex, he was able to get Jack Nicholson to co-star in his movie with him. Like, that was kind of my thought process of thinking of like his career. Like, he's so famous that Jack Nicholson co-starred in a movie with.
Yeah, not starred, co-starred.
Yeah, like Adam Sandler is the lead in Anger Management. And it's kind of like the thing of his career. If you look at it, it's like, okay, Al Pacino is a supporting character in Jack and Jill playing himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just kind of this. So when I'm thinking about it, I had to think about it logically. I'm sure Sandler and Nicholson knew each other because they're such Lakers guys. So I'm sure they met on the Celebrity Road during that time. So I'm sure there was some sort of a friendship that was met at this time. But if you just get Jack Nicholson to work in your movie and play second fiddle to you, like it was kind of hard for me to just be like, how many comedic actors could say that? Like, how many comedic actors could be like, hey, Jack, you're going to be in my movie?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why it's why I have him in for the second team. Do I necessarily put this as one of the 15 best Sandler movies? I don't know if I would, but it's just the undeniability of the fact that this movie is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I had it on second team. So those are the two we haven't talked about. You obviously have two of mine on here, or for my first team.
Yeah,
so who's your fifth that we didn't talk about?
I said you don't mess with the Zohan.
That's right. Okay, you don't mess
Did you
with
have
the
that?
Zohan.
Did you have it on 3?
It's a tough cut.
It's
I like this movie more than most people do.
You like which movie? You don't mess with
I like Zohan more than most people do.
Oh, I think the Zohan's hilarious. I think it's a great movie.
Yeah,
It's I don't know. I just think when Adam Sandler does like these different accents too and everything, like I just think again it's just like memorable. It's so funny.
I'm completely on the same page. I like this movie more than most people do, and I think it's also one of the ones where it's actually like him not just playing Sandler.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is him doing something a little different. I didn't make it on the list though. It was a tough cut. I did have Zohan written down, so it didn't make it on the list.
So we'll say though, so talking about Grown Ups and Big Daddy, I think those are
we haven't talked about these yet.
So Grown Ups is probably one of the most feel good Adam Sandler movies. It's it's an ensemble cast led by him. He leads the movie, and he probably had the most producing credit of anybody, if I had to guess too.
Yeah, definitely.
But the movie is just it's a classic Sandler movie. You get emotion, you get comedy, you get basketball, you get friendship, you get everything you could want and more. And it feels it's just an amazing movie. I contemplated putting it in tier 1 because again it's very rewatchable. Very rewatchable. It's probably the most well-known Sandler movie post 2010. It would be my guess. If you were to ask like a poll, I bet you most people would say, "Oh yeah, Grown Ups is it's a classic." But I just didn't think, okay, it's not purely an Adam Sandler movie.
Sure, yeah.
That's why I didn't put it in tier 1. I was like, okay, but this is like he leaves his footprint on it. It's a great movie. It's got so many so many like memorable scenes and like lines from the movie too.
For me, when I was thinking about Grown Ups, because this is probably my favorite just like rewatchable movie of his. Like this is the one I gravitate towards the most. This movie comes out when I'm like 12. So like this is my first introduction to like Chris Rock, David Spade, Rob Schneider. Then you have the rest of the SNL cast in here. Norm Macdonald's briefly in this movie. You have I'm trying to think who
Kevin
else.
James.
Kevin James, obviously. Tim Meadows, Colin Quinn's in this movie. Like Maya Rudolph. Like this is just the movie that when
Salma
I think
Hayek.
of Sandler, this is the movie of his that I just like. Like I love spending time with this. And I know this isn't necessarily one of his critically loved movies, but just in all of those cases, like it's a movie that just completely works to me. And if you weren't to make the argument like, oh, this is one of his best, this is also one of the few that spawned a franchise. Like this is a sequel of his, like this was a successful movie. Like that's why I felt pretty easy about getting it in second team. And then the other one, and it's the reason I put it in second team, his most profitable franchise is Hotel Transylvania. Like that is $1 billion grossing franchise. I've only seen the first Hotel Transylvania.
Same.
He's funny in it. Like I like it enough. I can't say I have any huge connection with it, but it's just like when you look at it, it's just like, okay, this is kind of just proof of how much Adam Sandler can do, because I do think a lot of the interest in this movie was Adam Sandler and all of his friends' doing funny voices as monsters.
Yeah, and it's like one of his few roles where he purely voice acts in it too.
Mm.
And I mean, it is a very beloved movie, and you're right, did do great at the box office. I had that one in tier three,
Okay,
Hotel Transylvania. I haven't seen the second one, or I think they made a third one at this point.
they made a fourth.
Yeah, I've heard they're not
He's
good.
not in the fourth one.
Okay, yeah, I've heard it's not good, but again, I like when he does like different accents. Like I think he's very versatile in that sense. Um, yeah, and I thought it was great casting for him to play a vampire in that too. Quickly before we move to tier three, did you say you had Big Daddy in two as
Yeah, I
well?
do have Big Daddy into, and my logic with this was one, this is also a movie I really like of his, and I don't know if this is true. I just maybe this is something I feel like I read, or maybe this is cultural osmosis. Like this to me would be the movie that I would guess Paul Thomas Anderson and saw and says like, okay, he can do Punch Drunk Love, like he can hit a certain emotional vulnerability in his performance. Maybe this and Wedding Singer is it, but I think this is one of his really shockingly sweet, earnest performances. Like the emotion that he has with, and it's the kid in this movie played by the Spouse twins. Like I really value what he does in this movie. I think it's a really heartfelt, sweet movie that just completely works for all those reasons. Like it's a very formulaic, you know exactly where this movie is going to go. It does have that Adam Sandler humor to it, but I think it's probably his most sweetest movie. Like this
Yeah,
is truly like of his PG-13 comedies, this is the one that like I this is probably the only one of them that makes me cry.
yeah, it's a very unique movie too. The story is great. I love
Yeah,
it.
no, I love this movie. It's this and The Wedding Singer are probably the only true films of his that for comedies that actually like make me tear up. Like I really love Big Daddy. So
Yeah,
third team, I know you have Count Dracula in here. I know I have 51st Dates, so we kind of know four of them.
I had the
This
longest.
is where
I think I said two. I have the longest yard. It made my three. You
that's right.
said you
You had
cut
the
it.
yeah, and I didn't have the longest yard. So we already talked about this off air, but we said this is probably the one where we're gonna have the least crossover. So
Yeah.
we'll do it one apiece. So you give me one name, I'll give you one name. So let's just kind of start. You gave off two already. We know two of yours, correct already?
The longest yard
Longest
and
yard and
Hotel
Hotel
Transylvania.
Transylvania. So I will do one because we already know that I have 51st Dates in here. I don't think you've seen this movie. I've only seen it once, and it's just the case of this is really his first comedic starring movie. I put Airheads, where he plays Pip the drummer. This is a 1994 comedy. He is technically second fiddle to Brendan Fraser in this movie, and he's in this movie along with Steve Buscemi. If you haven't seen this movie, he he's a drummer for this band. It's the three of them. They're this rock heavy metal band. They want to get their music on the air, so they hijack a radio station. Like they take a radio station hostage to get their movie or to get their song on the air. It is on the third tier because as I saw it, this was the case of it's really his first real starring type performance. So I kind of put it for a legacy reason. I can't say I have a huge connection with this movie, but it's also just again paying respect to where you begin. And
Yeah.
this is where he kind of began post SNL.
Okay. Interesting. Haven't seen that movie. I probably should put that on the rewatch or sorry, on the watch list. I have
You'd probably
as of
like it, yeah.
as of right now, I have Punch Drunk Love at number one on my
Mm.
Sandler watch list. Um, the next one that I had on three, again, I don't think we're gonna have the same one. Is Just Go With It. I don't think you had
Mm.
a. Did
I
you have it
didn't
on
have
there?
it on the list. I had it written down. He plays Danny McCaber or something like that in this movie.
Daniel McCabe, whatever.
Uh, I didn't have this down. I like this movie again. It's kind of just second tier uh Adam Sandler, maybe even probably like second tier Adam Sandler rom com for me.
Yeah, that's
Where
kind of why I put it in three, is because I'm like, yeah, it's not my first choice rom-com, it's not my second choice, but like it's probably my third. So like if I'm putting
mm,
50 First Dates in the first tier, then I'm putting The Wedding Singer in two, then I'm putting Just Go With It in three.
Yeah, I prefer for his rom-coms. I do like Blended, his third reunion with Drew
Jennifer.
Barrymore.
Oh,
I
Yeah, sorry, Drew Barrymore, not Jennifer.
I like the murder mystery movies. They weren't enough to get on this list, so I didn't have them all
Didn't put him
on
either.
there. But no, I understand. This is a very popular movie with people. Like this is one that, and I think it's the Aniston effect of this movie. Like she does pair very well with Sandler.
They have really good chemistry, and I think that was apparent in their first murder mystery movie together. I did not like the second one very much. The first one was definitely a fun watch, but
Oh, I was
Just
the
Go With
other way.
really,
I preferred the second one over the first one, but I like both enough.
yeah. Regardless, I mean, yeah, we think we're in agreement. Neither of them are good enough to make like the tiers, right?
Yeah, no, I don't really have, if I'm correct. Yeah, no, I don't have an no, sorry, that's a lie. I was gonna say I don't have another Sandler Netflix movie on here. His Netflix era isn't really something I gravitated towards, like Ridiculous Six, Stanley Wexler, like Hubie
Maybe
Halloween. Like
Halloween.
these weren't like movies that I really cared much about. There is one, and I'll just kind of reveal my third one on this list. And it's kind of a cheat. This is the only supporting performance I put of his on here. However, I was just thinking about it. Sandler is so well known as a family man, somebody who like makes movies to like basically stay close to his family and be like, his production companies with his wife and all
Hmm.
this. And when I was just thinking about it, one, for the quality of movie, because I really do value this movie. I think this is such a fun watch. And two, for what Sandler's doing in this movie as the supporting role. I did put his character Danny Friedman from the movie You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah. This is a movie that came out last year to Netflix, 2023. It stars his daughters, like his actual daughters, in the role as the titular role as the daughter going through her bat mitzvah. It's also his older daughters in this movie. His wife's in this movie. The two, it's Adam Sandler as the father, Idina Menzel's the mother in this movie, and highly recommend this movie to anyone who hasn't seen it. I just think it's a really fun watch. It's kind of a modern spin slash take on Judy Blume's You're Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Like it has a little bit of that coming of age 12 going to 13 feel to it.
Hmm.
Adam Sandler's really funny as the dad in this movie. It's just a really sweet performance from him. And he is very much the supporting one. But when he comes in this movie, he's just the typical dad who's kind of embarrassing his daughters, but has a really good heart. I really like this movie. And this is more of just a recommendation for people to go check it out. It's a really fun watch.
Yeah, 100%. I need to watch that too. That's on my list. We were just talking about that last night. I haven't seen
Mm.
it. Again, for whatever reason, like Spaceman, we talked about it with these Netflix movies. It just doesn't feel like they get a lot of marketing. Like I don't really hear much about it. There's no trailers, no real marketing from Netflix. Like again, they pick and choose their battles. And so, two movies that we just mentioned. I mean, being Spaceman and that one. Like, why are they
Yeah.
not lifting Sandler up on this pedestal?
You Are Not So Invited to My Bat Mitzvah has the unfortunate effect of this movie came out during the strike. It
Ooh.
came out like August, and this was the case of I think if the whole family did the press tour, like I think this movie would have been bigger deal. It was just the
Mhm.
case of it just didn't work out because of the SAG strike that happened right literally like a month before this film came out. So it kind of went under promoted with it. I think had Sandler done the press tour, I think this movie probably would have done significantly better. Maybe they should have held it, whatever. I really do enjoy this movie. So I've listed three of my five. Who's your next spot?
Yeah, my next spot is also a Netflix movie. One I watched very recently. I think you probably guess where I'm going with this. It's might be a hot take, but I put Leo in tier three.
Oh, really? I haven't seen this one.
I had so much fun with this movie. I I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was a very unique story for a movie. It's another voice acting role for him that I think he does super well in. And Bill Burr is a co-star in it as voice actor, and they just riff off of each other so well in this movie. And the animation is super unique too. I love the movie. Um, Not enough to put it above like anywhere in tier three related, but I put it pretty much on the same totem pole with Hotel Transylvania. I mean, it's a great voice acting role for him, and
Burr's in
it's a
this movie, right?
yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, Burr is his co-star as voice actor, and they riff very well off each other.
Yeah, I've been
We
meaning to see this movie. I
I
forgot
think
to
you'll
kind
like
of
it.
see it at the end of the year. I
I
think I'll
think
like it probably.
I think you'll like it too. It's got so much Sandler humor, and one of the reasons why I liked it is because it's a PG rated movie. It's
Mm,
and it's for kids, marketed for kids, but it
mm,
does have a lot of like adult underlying jokes in it,
sure.
and
I
that's just like something that's so true to Sandler.
I'll put this one on my list. I definitely will check out Leo at some point. My fourth, I put George Simmons, his character from Funny People, Judd Apatow's Funny People from 2009.
That was the other one I had on there too.
Oh, that's your fifth?
That's my fifth one.
Okay, I this is a complicated movie that I have complicated feelings for. I don't love this movie.
Hmm.
I respect this movie, and I think it has some of the best of Judd Apatow's work. And I think Seth Rogen is really good in this movie. I think
Hmm.
Rogen is like
It's
this
one
is
of
I
his
think
better performances.
yeah, this is him kind of showcasing that he's a good actor.
Hmm.
Uh Leslie Mann plays well off him. I know Schwartzman's in this movie, Jonah Hill. Aziz Ansari, Eric Bana's in this movie. Audrey
Hmm.
Claus is really good in this movie. Like there this is the world of comedy in which Sandler grew up, and it's almost him paying homage to it. Uh I really the reason I put this on is because I think it's a really strong Sandler performance. Like I think, and here's the thing, like if you're talking about my favorite Sandler dramatic role outside of Uncut Gems, it's Rain Over Me, which I did not include on this list.
Hmm.
That's his tribute to New York post 9/11 like movie, which is exploring the a man who loses his whole family on 9/11. I love Rain Over Me. I think it is such a beautiful performance. I just don't think it had the cultural impact that Funny People quite had. I just think that what Sandler does in this movie, and this is also one of his few roles where he plays like truly an asshole for most of the movie.
Hmm.
Like he is truly a hard to like character in it. This is obviously Judd Apatow and him are roommates in college. Like they have this close friendship. It's just it works for me as what it is, even if the movie itself is a little overlong, a little melodramatic, and it doesn't hit every beat that I would like this movie to hit. It's certainly Sandler placing himself in a level of emotional vulnerability that he's so open to doing in this role because it does feel like very much a reflection on him being Adam Sandler.
Hmm. Yeah. I A very unique role for him. Very yeah, he plays an asshole. You're right. It's one of the reasons why I put him in there is because you can't say I can't think of another movie off the top of my head. I'm sure there is one where he's just like plays that specific of a character. And is the movie funny overall? Sure, it has its
Yeah,
moments. It's not my
yeah,
favorite movie. It's not my favorite movie. Again, like going in tier three, but I think you have to give it the nod based off of again the cultural significance of the movie and how he, is able to interpret that role.
yeah, and it feels like, and maybe it's that kind of like step up thing where I'm just like, if Uncut Gems is his like tier one performance, I then put Punch Drunk Love in his tier two, working with Paul Thomas Anderson. Tier three is him in like Judd Apatow, Funny People, him in like Rain Over Me, like those where it's just like it levels up. So it's like what he does in Rain Over Me affects what he will eventually do in like Spaceman and all that. Like, so that's how I saw that trajectory. Again, if you're going by just personal pick, I would have put Rain Over Me in this. I couldn't really justify it. And now I really hate that I don't have Rain Over Me in here because I have one more slot left and you do not, correct? We've run through all your five.
Yeah, we went through them all. You can
Do
whatever.
you want to guess my five?
Uh, I don't think it's Spaceman.
It's
Is
not.
it Mr. Deeds?
It is not Mr. Deeds. That's a movie that I don't really have much affinity for. I'm
Is
not a huge
it?
Mr. Deeds guy. I'll give
Oh
you one more
God.
guess.
Is it Click?
It is not Click. That's another movie I don't have much affinity for. I'm
Yeah,
not a huge Click guy.
I don't like Click either.
Uh,
No, I don't know what it is then.
I can't believe I did it, and I really feel bad about having this movie in instead of Charles Feynman for Rain Over Me, which again I love Rain Over Me, and it's definitely if you're just going movies and performances for me, it's higher. But if you're just thinking of everything that Adam Sandler will be remembered for in his career, I just had to pay homage to his raunchier side, like the juvenile humor that made him who he was on SNL and his first few comedy albums, like gross out, stupid humor, like
Hmm.
crazy voices and antics, like really just trying to go for shock. Like this is like, you know, really the R rated of the R rated comedy toilet humor that only Sandler can do. And like, there's one movie that actually hit that criteria. And I was looking at it and I'm just like, this is a performance that he gives that is completely unique in the rest of his filmography. I don't know how well the movie ages, but when thinking about it, I was just like, Donnie Berger for That's My Boy has to be the fifth and final slot on here.
I didn't know you were gonna say that.
I like this movie more than most people did at the time. And I also want to put a disclaimer on that I was like 13 when this movie came out.
Well, we had mentioned it last night too.
Yeah,
Like
we did talk about it.
it's one
This
of those
comes out in
movies.
2012.
Yeah, when you're like 13 and you see this movie, you're like, this is the best comedy I've ever seen in my life. And then you watch it again as you get older, and you're like, this is not great.
No,
You're
it's
like,
not. I haven't rewatched the movie for that exact reason. Like I haven't wanted to soil my experience of enjoying this movie again.
mhm.
There's no way this movie holds up on rewatch. There's no way this movie is actually good. I'm just thinking of like if you're paying respect to Sandler's career and you're trying to be all encompassing in it, I think this level of humor that Sandler was known for is one that post like him in Happy Gilmore, post him in Wedding Singer, Big Daddy, and all that. He never really returned to this mode of comedy, and this is like the rare exception of him doing this character, which he was so well known for early in his career. So that's why I
Mhm.
put it in my fifth slot.
Nice.
Some tough cuts I had. I almost put Michael Newman from Click just because of the box office of it. Like that's one of his most successful movies. I almost put Zohan in there. Mr. Deeds was certainly in conversation. And then the Ridiculous Six, I almost just put in there to acknowledge the Netflix deal. Like that's a huge part of his career, even though I've never seen the Ridiculous Six, but that's why I
Mhm.
didn't put it on there. But I was like, that is a huge part of his story.
Yeah, my first two cuts off the list were Mr. Deeds and Click, and I'm not really a huge fan of either of the movies.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, overall, I mean, I like my list. I think we kind of had similar strategies when we're thinking about like an NBA tier one
Mm.
and or like a sorry, like an all NBA tier one, two, and three. Like we put one from like each of his like roles or like
Mm.
a
Yeah,
specific kind of idea like of a comedy, rom com, dramatic role, dramatic role, dramatic role. Like we kind of had the similar ideas there, although we didn't have agree completely though. We definitely tier one. I feel like we're pretty much in unison up there for
yeah,
the
I feel like
majority.
our tier one and tier two were basically close to identical. So let's just for context wise, let's just go through it again real quick. First team, second team, third team, and then we'll get to our six man of the year award. So first team, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, Howard Ratner from Uncut Gems, Robbie Hart from The Wedding Singer, and Bobby Boucher for The Waterboy. Chris, your first tier was
I had Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison, Uncut Gems, 51st Dates, and Hustle.
second team, I had Count Dracula in Hotel Transylvania, Barry Egan from Punch Drunk Love, Lenny Feeder for Grown Ups, Sonny Koufax for Big Daddy, and Dave Busnick for Anger Management.
In my tier two, I had The Wedding Singer, we had The Waterboy, we had Big Daddy, we had You Don't Mess with the Zohan, and we had Lenny Fader Grown Ups.
And then third team, I had Pip, the drummer from Airheads, Henry Roth from 51st Dates, George Simmons from Funny People, Danny Friedman from You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah. And in my fifth slot, in a very regrettable fifth slot, I had Donnie Berger from That's My Boy.
My list is kind of fumbled at the end, but I have Leo, Just Go With It, The Longest Yard, and then Hotel Transylvania. And what was the last one I just said?
You said,
I
oh
think
my
we're in
gosh,
agreement with it.
Airheads 51st, Funny People, George Simmons,
Yeah,
Funny
Funny
People.
People. There we go. Yeah, sorry.
So
Yep.
those are our tier list. And now to end this show, we have one more, the six man of the year, the Rob Schneider six man of the year. all of Rob Schneider's supporting performances, which one did you pick for his six man? I wonder if we have the same.
There was three movies that I had to choose between.
Yeah, what
I
are the
think
three? Let's just kind of identify that because I have a feeling we have the same three.
so. Well, I wrote down two. I wrote down the two, but the two off the top of my head that were like for sure, I'm going to be one or the other is 50 First Dates and Grown Ups. Those were the two where I'm like, okay, which one?
Mhm.
Which one am I going to pick? And I ultimately went with Grown Ups. I went with where he plays Rob Hilliard in Grown Ups.
Mhm.
It's probably like the most we see Rob Schneider in an Adam Sandler movie. That's one of the reasons why I
Definitely
picked
for
him.
sure.
And every time he's on screen, he steals it for me. He steals the movie, and he's so funny. And just the fact that he's dating like an older lady in her 80s in the movie, and he has a toupee, it just all plays into the movie. And he's phenomenal. And all his three daughters in the movie. I mean, how could you
Oh my
not
god, yeah,
laugh so
funniest
hard?
joke.
It's the
I
funniest shit. He's great in that movie.
I did not put Rob Schneider for grown-ups on it. It was we had it limited down to three. I had The Water Boy, I had 50 First Dates, I had grown-ups. My logic with grown-ups was he's almost levels up to me in that movie where it's just like he's almost like a starter.
Hmm.
So it kind of felt like it was invalidating the role of a six man
Hmm.
because he's literally like the fifth person in that movie. Also, I just personally he's my least favorite of the five grown-ups in that movie, which is probably not a hot take. Uh
Hmm.
but so when I was thinking of it like true six-man performance, I was thinking of either The Water Boy or 50 First Dates. I did go The Water Boy.
That's I can't disagree with that. Another one I thought too was Big Daddy. Like he's
He's funny in Big Daddy.
hardly in the movie, but he's really great in it. Why did you pick The Water Boy?
I think it's his most iconic of the supporting roles. Like, there's so many lines that I just think of. You can do it, and then,
Yeah,
oh no, we suck again. I
great
just,
movie.
it's kind of just a perfect use. He's the townie in the movie. It's just kind of a perfect use of Schneider in a small bit. And I'm not a huge Schneider guy, so the lesser the role, sometimes the easier for it for
50 First
me.
Dates was my runner up. I almost picked it.
That was my runner up as well because again, logically in my head, I just didn't see six man of the year as Rob Schneider being fair for grown-ups, but I also understand the take because he is definitely not the lead of that movie by any means. Like he is the supporting of the supporting
Hmm.
five. So that is our show. So thank you all for watching today's episode. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel for more reviews and video discussion. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. Can the people find you anywhere? Is the
Yeah, you can.
podcast taking a hiatus?
The podcast is taking a hiatus because my counterpart or my right hand man he had a little child, so we won't be doing the podcast for a little bit, but you can find us on 10-inch talks. That's 10 the number 10-inch talks on Instagram, social media, every social media, Spotify, we're everywhere. Listen to our podcast, mostly Kings related stuff, but we talk about movies occasionally and we get Ben on there sometimes.
Yeah. And guys, make sure if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel for more movie reviews and discussion. Thank you all for checking out my Dune Part 2 review this weekend, even through a lot of the unkind words I've been hearing. Thank you for helping me get that to 1,000 views in less than 24 hours. I really appreciate it. And we will be back this week. This is Oscars week, so I will be talking a lot of Oscar films, and I will be going live. I should announce it if I haven't already. I am going live Sunday, March 10th. I believe it's 5 p.m. is when the show starts. I will be live streaming the Oscar ceremony and giving my live, honest reaction to it. So thank you all for watching this video. Like and subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye.